this is such an important issue that Liberation has decided to organise the meeting on and to foreground, because it's not exactly right to say that the conflict in Yemen is a forgotten war, but it doesn't have the understanding amongst the British people that it should. I think people across this country have some idea of the catastrophic consequences of Britain's military intervention in Iraq and in Libya, and its only slightly less direct intervention in Syria, countries that have been laid waste over the course of the last generation by the actions, policies of British governments in large part. The truth is that the situation in Yemen ought to be equally laid at the account of the British government. We know that there's a humanitarian disaster occurring there. A conservative estimate of the number of lives lost as a result of the civil war is now in excess of 100,000, either as a direct result of military action or as a consequence of the famine that has followed on the civil war and the huge difficulties that there are in any form of aid reaching the suffering people of Yemen. Now, of course, a conflict in Yemen, like any conflict, has a mixture of roots. But I think for us, it's important to see that this is part of the Western hegemonic project in the Middle East, which has often been fought under the rubric of the war on terror. And indeed, that is how the American government appear to be conceiving of this now, with the designation as an outgoing gift to the region from the Trump administration of the Houthis as a terrorist organization, which entails all number of diplomatic further complexities for which the Yemeni people will pay the price. But I think we need to see that this is a British war just as much as it is a Saudi war. We know that Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have been leading the actual military intervention, but this has got British fingerprints all over it. And this is as much a conflict for which Britain bears a responsibility as the Iraq War was, which had, of course, millions of people demonstrating against it. I think it was well expressed by an RAF official who said the Saudis couldn't be doing this without us. The support given by Britain to this war is immense. At least £5 billion worth of arms are being sold to Saudi Arabia by Britain each year. When the civil war started, there was an immediate huge leap in the number of bombs, British-made bombs, being exported to Saudi Arabia each month. And it's not just a matter of the military arms. That doesn't do justice to the intimacy of Britain's involvement in this conflict. The Royal Air Force has training personnel there, training the Saudi pilots who are dropping the bombs, and it has even got targeters who are supposed to be assisting the Saudi and UAE forces in deciding where to drop the bombs. The British BAE Systems, the main arms supplier, the main arms monopoly in Britain, has personnel there as well. I mean, it's believed there's more than 6,000 British people at forward bases involved in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, involved in directing this war. Of course, the British government has also given diplomatic cover to Saudi Arabia, where this war, which is even opposed by the majority of members of the US Congress, has been kept going by the sponsorship of the Trump administration, of course, and the British government as well. Again, to quote a British official, If us and the Americans said this had to stop, it would stop within a week. That's to say, if we were to tell Saudi Arabia that this war had to end, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, they would be unable to carry it on without our support. So it's not an exaggeration, it's not hyperbole to say that there is blood on the British government's hands in Saudi Arabia. This is a humanitarian disaster, in large part made in London. And the reason for that is the corrupt relationship that the British government, the British establishment, and yes, a large element of the American establishment have with the Saudi regime. They frame this conflict as being an extension of a struggle in the Middle East between Saudi Arabia, who are supposed to be the good guys on the one hand, and Iran on the other. Now, it's certainly not my purpose here to speak in defense of the Iranian regime at all, which does oppress its own people. However, look at Saudi Arabia. In the last few years, Saudi Arabia has intervened militarily in one country in the region to suppress a democracy movement. That's Bahrain. It has only just finished a 3-year blockade of another country, Qatar. It has kidnapped the prime minister of a third, Lebanon. It has endorsed a military dictatorship in a fourth, Egypt. It has intervened in a civil war in a fifth, Syria. And it has butchered one of its own citizens in the embassy of a sixth, Turkey, before one even gets to Yemen. This would be a record that would be called the record of a rogue state anywhere else. That, that is not to deny negative consequences of Iranian policy in some respects. But this, Saudi Arabia, is the policy that we are endorsing, that the British government is involved in, that because of our links involving arms sales, oil, in other investments, as well as strategic interests, all tied up together, that Britain is propping up the Saudi regime or helping prop up the Saudi regime. We must hope that the Biden administration in America gives an opening for a better policy or at least a more nuanced policy, a less wholehearted endorsement of everything that the Saudi regime does. And we hopefully, it might be the beginning of some pressure to wind down this war. But we have to be putting the pressure on our own government. And I would finish, Christine, by just saying there's two things that the British Labour movement needs to be aware of. Firstly, of course, and I speak apart from my other hats as Chief of Staff of Unite, we have many members involved in manufacturing, many members who are involved in manufacturing arms. That is a difficult and sensitive issue. No trade union wants to campaign for its own members to lose their jobs. But we have to put the principle first that the British government should not be selling arms under any circumstances to the Saudi regime, and the British government should then be taking whatever action is necessary to protect the skilled employment in those industries. Workers should not pay the price for this, but still less should the suffering people of Yemen pay a price. The second aspect of the labour movement, and I'll end on this point, is we have to remember that in the years of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, where he was opposed by the Parliamentary Labour Party on, unfortunately, all too many questions, the biggest rebellion against his leadership, when more than 70 Labour MPs defied the whip, was when he was asking Labour MPs to vote against arms sales to Saudi Arabia. That, unfortunately, is a mark of shame for the PLP, and that it shows the fight that we have to win the argument for Britain to disengage from its imperialist policy in the Middle East, which is underwriting in our name all these atrocities, above all in the Yemen right now. And we have to win the Labour Party to campaign aggressively, and all Labour MPs, to stop arms sales to Saudi Arabia while this calamity in the Yemen is continuing. Thank you.